There is a season near the end of a long life that rarely announces itself loudly. It does not arrive with sirens or emergencies. It arrives quietly, in small changes so subtle that most families miss them entirely until they look back months later and realize the signs were there all along. Today, I want to walk you through 5 of those subtle signs, the kind a doctor may not mention at a routine visit, but the kind that a person who has lived long enough and loved long enough learns to recognize. This is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to help you notice, so that if this season is beginning for someone you love, you do not miss the chance to be fully present for it. If you find comfort in conversations like this one, honest, gentle, and rooted in real experience rather than fear, I hope you will consider staying with us here at Golden Wisdom. We talk about the parts of growing older that most people are too afraid to discuss, not to dwell in sadness, but so that none of us has to face these seasons unprepared. Now, let us talk about these 5 signs, gently and honestly. The first sign is a quiet kind of withdrawal, and it is often the earliest one, sometimes appearing many months before anything else changes. You may notice that a parent or grandparent who once looked forward to family gatherings begins finding reasons not to attend. The phone calls that used to last 40 minutes shrink down to 5. The neighbor they used to chat with over the fence gets a polite wave instead of a conversation. It is not depression exactly, though it can look similar from the outside, and it is not simply tiredness either. It is something researchers and hospice workers describe as a kind of resignation, a slow closing of the circle around a person's life, as though some part of them is beginning, quietly, and perhaps not even consciously, to let go of the wider world in order to conserve what energy remains for what matters most. I think of my own grandmother in her final year, though none of us understood at the time what we were witnessing. She had always been the one who organized the family reunions, who called her sisters every single Sunday without fail, who never missed a birthday. In her last year, she began asking us to visit her instead of the other way around. She stopped attending her weekly card game, telling us simply that she preferred to rest at home now. We assumed she was simply slowing down the way older people do. Looking back, I recognize now that her world was quietly contracting, drawing inward, focusing only on the people and moments that mattered most to her. If you notice a loved one pulling back from the wider circle of their life, gently drawing closer only to their innermost people, pay attention. It may simply be a season of rest, but it may also be something more. There is a particular texture to this kind of withdrawal that differs from ordinary introversion or simple tiredness. It is not that the person becomes unhappy or irritable, often quite the opposite. There can be a strange, gentle calm to it, as though the person has simply decided, without ever announcing the decision out loud, that certain things no longer require their attention. The garden they once tended meticulously may go unweeded, and they seem untroubled by it. The community events they once felt obligated to attend no longer pull at their conscience the way they used to. Family members often describe this as their loved one becoming easier, softer, less concerned with the small frictions of daily life. And while this can feel like a relief in the moment, it is often, in hindsight, one of the earliest and most telling signs of all. The second sign involves food, and it is one that frightens families more than almost any other, because eating feels so fundamental to life that its absence feels like a warning bell ringing loudly in every room of the house. A person who once cleared their plate at every meal begins leaving food untouched. Favorite dishes, the ones that used to bring genuine delight, no longer interest them the way they once did. They may tell you they are simply not hungry, and they are not lying to you. As the body approaches its final season, metabolism slows considerably, and the body genuinely requires less fuel than it once did. This is not a failure of willpower, and it is rarely something that more encouragement or more persistent urging can fix. I want to say something important here, because I know how desperately families want to help in this moment. The instinct to push more food, to insist on one more bite, to bring in every favorite dish hoping something will spark an appetite, comes from a place of love, but it often causes more distress than comfort. The kindest thing you can do, in most cases, is to offer food gently, without pressure, and allow the person's own body to guide how much or how little they need. A decreasing appetite in an otherwise healthy, active older adult may mean very little on its own. But when it appears alongside noticeable weight loss, a general decline in strength, and little interest even in foods that once brought joy, it often signals that the body has begun a slow, natural process of conserving its remaining energy. I remember sitting with my own father in his final months, watching him push aside a plate of the very stew he had requested by name only a week earlier. My mother, frantic with worry, began preparing 3 or 4 different dishes at every meal, hoping something would tempt him. It broke her heart when none of it worked. It was a kind hospice nurse who finally sat with her and explained gently that this was not a battle to be won, that her father's body was doing exactly what bodies in this season do, and that the greatest gift she could give him now was not a fuller plate, but her calm presence beside him, free of worry about whether he ate. Once she let go of that particular fight, both of them found a strange kind of peace in those final shared meals, however small they became. The third sign is fatigue, but not the ordinary tiredness that comes from a poor night's sleep or a busy week. This is a deeper, more persistent exhaustion, one that does not lift no matter how much rest a person gets. You may notice a parent who once rose early every morning, now sleeping well into the afternoon. Conversations that used to flow easily become shorter, punctuated by long pauses, as though speaking itself has become an effort that requires gathering strength beforehand. Activities that were once simple, dressing, bathing, walking to the mailbox, begin to take noticeably longer, and afterward, a kind of exhaustion settles in that a nap cannot fully resolve. This happens because, in the final season of life, the body's systems gradually begin working less efficiently. The heart pumps with slightly less force. Oxygen moves through the body a little less effectively. Digestion slows. All of this combines to create a fatigue that is fundamentally different from ordinary tiredness, a fatigue that no amount of coffee, encouragement, or rest can fully lift. If you notice this kind of profound, unshakable exhaustion settling over someone you love, especially alongside the other signs I am describing, it deserves your gentle attention and a conversation with their doctor or hospice team, not simply an assumption that they need more sleep. There is another quiet detail worth mentioning here, one that families often notice only in hindsight. Alongside this deep fatigue, some people begin to sleep at unusual hours, dozing through the middle of the afternoon, and then lying awake in the small hours of the night, as though their internal clock has quietly shifted out of its old rhythm. Others describe vivid dreams, or moments of being caught somewhere between sleep and waking, murmuring softly, or reaching toward something unseen. These moments can be unsettling to witness, but they are, more often than not, simply another expression of a body and mind beginning to rest more deeply than they ever have before. The fourth sign is one that caught my own family completely by surprise because it did not look like decline at all. It looked, in a strange way, like clarity. In the final year of life, many people begin speaking more about the past than the present, revisiting old memories with unusual vividness and detail, sometimes recalling stories from decades earlier that they had not mentioned in years. Alongside this, some begin, quietly and without any obvious prompting, addressing unfinished business. A father who had not spoken to an estranged brother in 15 years suddenly picks up the phone. A mother who never discussed her wishes for her belongings begins gently mentioning who she would like to have her wedding ring, her father's old watch, her recipe box. Some people begin expressing gratitude more openly than they ever had before, telling children and grandchildren directly how much they are loved, in words that feel oddly deliberate, almost as though they are making sure those words have finally been said. Hospice workers who spend their lives alongside people in this season describe this as a kind of quiet preparation, sometimes conscious, sometimes seemingly instinctive, a settling of accounts before a long journey. I do not say this to unsettle you, but to help you recognize it if it happens in your own family, so that instead of dismissing these conversations as unusual or brushing past them uncomfortably, you can meet them with the openness and presence they deserve. If someone you love suddenly wants to talk about old memories, express old apologies, or simply tell you they love you more often than they used to, do not rush past that moment. Sit in it. Let them say what they need to say. These conversations, however uncomfortable they may feel in the moment, are often among the most meaningful a family will ever share. My own mother-in-law, a woman known throughout her family for being practical almost to a fault, rarely sentimental, spent an entire afternoon in her final year going through an old cedar chest with her daughter, pulling out photographs neither of them had looked at in decades, telling stories behind each one in far more detail than she ever had before. At the time, her daughter simply thought her mother was enjoying a nostalgic afternoon. Only later did she come to understand that her mother had been quietly passing down the family's history while she still had the clarity and the words to do it properly. If a loved one suddenly wants to go through old photographs, tell old stories, or revisit places from their past, consider it not an inconvenience, but an invitation you may only be offered once. The fifth sign is physical, and it involves the body's declining ability to bounce back from things it once recovered from easily. You may notice more frequent infections, urinary infections, respiratory infections that seem to take longer to clear than they once did. A minor fall that would have resulted in nothing more than a bruise. A few years earlier now results in a hospital stay. Wounds heal more slowly. A cold that once passed in a few days now lingers for weeks, or seems to leave the person weaker than before, in a way they do not fully recover from even after the illness itself has passed. This happens because, in the final stretch of life, the body's ability to repair and defend itself gradually diminishes. The immune system responds less vigorously. Wound healing slows. Balance and coordination, which depend on countless small systems working together, become less reliable. Doctors sometimes describe this as a kind of accumulating frailty, where the body no longer fully returns to its previous baseline after each illness or setback, but instead settles into a slightly lower level of function each time. If you notice a loved one who used to bounce back quickly from minor illnesses now struggling to recover fully, staying weaker, more tired, or more confused. Even weeks after the illness has technically resolved, this pattern deserves real attention from their medical team. Family caregivers often describe this pattern as a staircase rather than a straight line, a series of small drops in function, each followed by a brief plateau that never quite returns to where things stood before. A woman who managed her own household completely at the start of the year needs a little help with laundry by the summer, and by autumn needs help with meals as well, each new limitation arriving quietly on the heels of some minor illness or fall that seemed, at the time, Unremarkable. Recognizing this staircase pattern, rather than assuming each setback is isolated and unrelated to the last, can help families understand more clearly what season they are truly walking through. I want to pause here and say something important, gently but clearly. None of these 5 signs, on their own, means that someone you love is entering their final year. Withdrawal can simply mean someone needs rest, or is dealing with grief, or depression that can genuinely be treated. Loss of appetite can stem from medication side effects, dental pain, or a dozen other treatable causes. Fatigue can come from anemia, thyroid problems, or sleep disorders that respond well to proper care. Reflective conversations about the past can simply be the natural work of a person reviewing a long and meaningful life without any connection to how much time remains. And frequent infections can sometimes be resolved with a change in medication or a more attentive care plan. I am not asking you to see these signs and assume the worst. I am asking you to notice them, take them seriously, and bring them to a doctor or hospice professional who can help you understand what is truly happening, rather than guessing alone at home, filled with fear. What I have learned, both from my own family's experience and from listening to countless others who have walked this same road, is that the families who navigate this season with the least regret are the ones who paid attention early, who did not wait for a crisis to start having honest conversations. If you notice several of these signs together in someone you love, I encourage you gently to speak with their doctor honestly, to ask directly whether hospice or palliative care might be appropriate to explore, not because it means giving up, but because these services exist specifically to bring comfort, support, and expert guidance to families exactly in this season. Many families wait far too long to reach out for this kind of support, sometimes only in the final days, when months of comfort and connection could have been available all along. I also want to speak directly to those of you watching who suspect, in your own quiet way, that someone you love may be in this season right now. I know how frightening this realization can feel, how much you may want to push it away, to tell yourself you are imagining things, to keep hoping for improvement instead of preparing for what may be coming. I want you to know that noticing these signs and allowing yourself to sit with what they might mean is not giving up on your loved one. It is, in fact, one of the most loving things you can do for them. It is what allows you to be fully present, rather than distracted by denial. It is what allows the difficult conversations, the words of love, the moments of forgiveness, the simple presence of holding a hand, to happen while there is still time for them to happen, rather than being rushed at the very end, or missed altogether. There is a particular kind of grief that comes from realizing, only after someone has passed, that there were signs you did not understand at the time, conversations you brushed past, moments you did not fully honor because you did not recognize what season you were truly in. I share these 5 signs with you today so that you might be spared that particular grief, so that if this season is beginning for someone you love, you can walk into it with open eyes, a soft heart, and the presence that this time deserves. I also want to gently remind you that recognizing these signs is not the same as predicting an exact timeline. Some people show several of these signs and remain with their families for another year, sometimes longer, settling into a slower rhythm of life rather than approaching its end. Others decline more quickly than any of these signs would suggest. The body does not follow a script, and no video, including this one, can tell you with certainty what is coming or when. What these signs can do, reliably, is help you shift your attention, help you choose presence over distraction, patience over frustration, and connection over the small daily arguments that so easily consume our time with the people we love. That shift in attention, more than any precise prediction, is the true gift these signs can offer a family willing to notice them. If you take only one thing from what I have shared today, let it be this. Pay attention to the quiet changes, not with fear, but with love. A parent or grandparent pulling back from the wider world, eating less than they once did, sleeping more deeply and for longer, speaking more of the past, recovering more slowly from illness. These are not simply signs of decline to be dismissed or dreaded. They are, in their own quiet way, invitations to draw closer while there is still time, to say the things that matter, to sit a little longer at the table, to hold a hand a little longer before letting go. Growing older, and eventually approaching the end of a long and full life, is not something our culture prepares us well to understand or to face with grace. But those who have walked this road before us have left behind a kind of wisdom, quiet but real, that says this season, difficult as it is, can also be one of the most meaningful of an entire lifetime if we are willing to notice it and to be truly present within it. I have come to believe, after everything I have witnessed and everything families have shared with me over the years, that the final season of a long life is not simply an ending to be endured. It is, in its own quiet way, a final chapter with its own particular gifts of honesty, of gratitude, of closeness that sometimes only becomes possible once the smaller distractions of daily life fall away. Families who recognize this season for what it is, rather than fighting against it or fleeing from it, often describe it afterward not only as one of the hardest periods of their lives, but also, unexpectedly, as one of the most tender. Thank you for sitting with me through this conversation today. If it helped you understand something you have been quietly wondering about, or gave you the courage to have a conversation you have been putting off, I hope you will share it with someone else who might need to hear it too. And if you would like more honest, gentle conversations like this one, stay with us here at Golden Wisdom. We are here for every season of this journey, including the ones that are hardest to talk about.